Welcome to the Regenaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Griggs. Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more. How long have you been into the world of agriculture and regenerative agriculture?
I've been into it probably for, trying to think, probably since 2007, 2008, I started getting into it from a consumer standpoint. And then we started our farm end of 21. We purchased the land. Spring of 22, we put trees in the ground. Fall of 22, we put animals on the ground and started rotation. So, it's been a little over a year. We're in our second season, really, of looking how the trees respond and everything, but it's been fucking incredible.
So back in 2007, I'm assuming, is it just directly tied to your fighting career, or?
Yeah, I had a strength coach introduce me a book called How to Eat, Move, Me Healthy by Paul Chek. And before that, Flatten Your Abs Forever video, he had me watch. And he's wearing, I love dirt shirts and talk about soil quality way before everyone else. And that really got me primed for it. And then as an athlete, it was like what I recognized fully through finishing that book: the better fuel I put in my body, the better I exert myself in the cage, period. And that was such a valuable test for me to have. Anywhere I went, I was following guys like that. So like we came here, we're like, oh shit, Rome Ranch is down the streets and it's in Fredericksburg, and became buddies with those guys and brought my son out 4 years ago for his first bison harvest. Okay. And I split a cow with Taylor, who owns Rome Ranch and is one of the founders of Force of Nature. So we still have that bison fur. We have that bison Euro skull, and that's what fed my little girl when she was in the womb. So like she got to be built on that bison.
That's incredible.
And I just think like everyone that I've met in this space are so awesome too. Like that's what I love about the game itself is very open source. It's not like, no, this is my proprietary way of fixing the earth. Like, no, fucking everyone needs to know this. I'm happy to share with what worked for me and let's do it,
I cannot agree more. Because I come from a tech background. That's why I started this brand. I had a lot of family stuff, and made me realize how disconnected I was. And switching into agriculture was the single greatest decision of my life. I worked on a farm in rural Pennsylvania, and then since then, the people I continue to meet are so incredible. That's just incredible. With taking your kids out there, what was that experience like? Also, I guess the first question would be, growing up, did you ever go on farms or any of that? And then just curious, pairing that with taking your kid there and seeing what their experience was like.
I'm going to take this sweater off. I'm getting warm. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
So let me see if I got these right. Did I grow up on a farm or any experiences as a kid? And then what was it like taking my son out?
Yeah.
I grew up in Sunnyvale, which I thought was like small town, of 120,000 people. But next to San Jose, San Francisco, and Oakland, it was really small. And Cupertino was like 55,000 people. It's where I ended up going to high school in Monte Vista. And, still city, suburbs, that kind of thing, still close to major cities, major airports. My great uncle had about 40 acres in Modesto in Central California. And he had peach orchards, and he also entered his mules into the Mule Days tournament and had like 12 blue ribbons from this one mule. It was a badass. It was awesome. And so we could ride horses and mules there and pick fresh peaches off the trees. We ended up moving to Turlock, which is not far from there, for about 10 months. And we had 8 acres of grape vineyards. And I remember as a 10-year-old, 8 acres felt like fucking forever to us. Like I was like, it just went and went and went. And, my parents got us a half wolf, half Malamute as a dog. And they knew he was our protector. Like, they're like, you guys go wherever, as long as you got Lobo with you. And I was like, all right, cool. So we'd go riding bikes and swim in the canals. And there was a real sense of freedom there that I hadn't experienced before. I still longed for the excitement of the city. Mm-hmm. And we ended up moving back just for work opportunities. It was a real pain in the ass for my dad to make that commute each day and back to the Bay Area. And my mom couldn't find work out there. So moved back. And I don't think I ever had like a real draw, like this is what I'm going to do when I grow up, until, as we got to Texas and I started seeing how awesome the farmland is and how close it is to everything. It's not like we got to drive 5 hours to find the country. We're in Lock Harbor, 30 minutes from Austin.
Yeah.
It took me 45 minutes to get to anywhere in the Bay Area, and all it is city after city after city, right? So driving 30 minutes and being just out in the cuts where it's quiet and it's calm and you got all these animals and all these birds and all the different things going on, it really made sense. But, there's a series of events that happened. One, I continued to embrace my connection to farms via guys like Taylor and Rome Ranch, and taking Bear out there, that's 1,500 acres. we get on a gator and go tour that land, and the same thing. I'm like, just like I felt when I was 10, damn, it's forever. It just keeps going and going and going. And there is something, really special about the bison herd itself, because they're not domestic, like it's not like you can just go up and start petting them and having fun with them. And I think there's beauty in that. Like, you're in the presence of a wild animal, maybe not completely wild, but definitely not domestic. And with a size that could kill you, even I've always been a big dude, football player, fighter, all these things. And it's just like, it's a humbling experience to be in the presence of something like that, and over time, got into hunting, which again was a huge connection to my food, a huge connection to nature, and a huge connection to the outdoors. And continued to make trips. I've become good friends with Taylor and the guys at Rome Ranch, Robbie, Force of Nature, and had him on the podcast and continue to broaden that. It wasn't until 2020 where I realized, like, as a father and a provider, if I can't keep the lights turned on, if I can't keep fresh water in their mouth, and if I can't put food on the table as the world comes to crashing halt, then I'm fucked, and I'm not going to watch my kids starve or die of thirst. And so it was a big, big shift for me in realizing, I think a lot of people saw 2020 as, no matter which side of the fence you're on, they saw it as like a blip, and we're back to normal now. And that probably won't happen for another 80 years if it does. I see that as more potentially a blip that we will have more of in the near future within the next 10 years. And, with that, I can let fear consume me, or I can decide to do something about it. And, I didn't have the dough to do all the things, to buy the land and things like that, but I do have friends with wealth and friends that I've worked with for a long time. And Aubrey Marcus is one of my close friends, one of my best friends. And, we do Fit for Service, like a face-to-face meetup we have 3 times a year with people. And in 2020, when we met in Sedona on his land, that was the first time many people had hugged the whole year in October of 2020. First time a musician had played live music the whole fucking year. And, just thinking about that, I was like, our business is gone if we can't meet up face to face. Like, it might do okay online, but the magic is when we're face to face. And, really wanting that, really wanting the ability to grow our own food, I just was an Aub's ear nonstop. Like, hey, when the time comes and we have the available funds and the smoke clears from all this stuff, let's get some land, and let's have it in Texas, and I'll tend the land, I'll grow the food, I'll do all the things. We'll have an extra place where we can bring Fit for Service members, and that's what we did. On it sold in 2021, we found it. He had always had a dream of having a place like that as well locally for various reasons, but really to elevate consciousness, and to have a gathering space for that. And it's all those things, it's an event center, it's a regenerative farm, it's a permaculture farm, it's a space for me and my family, and for plenty of other people. We're building community out there as well.
Is this the Gardners of Eden?
Yes. That's Gardners of Eden in Lockhart. It's not a farm. Spirit Ranch is this other place in Sedona. It's a ranch, it's not a farm. They've got some horses, but it would take some real tending the land to get to get food to grow there without a greenhouse. So
yeah, I'm curious with Gardners of Eden. I guess the first question too: what made you choose that name? And I guess why?
Yeah. So I mean, part of the biggest thing I would say in my reconnection to nature, coming from a city, was working with plant medicines. And when I fought in the UFC, I had a boxing coach who was a mestizo, Aztec, Mexican. And he'd bring me to a reservation for local sweat lodges and things like that. And some of the other fighters would come. After a while, we started working with different plant medicines. And eventually with ayahuasca, and ayahuasca uniquely, compared to other plant medicines, it really revealed some truths about consciousness that I had read about, but never really experienced for myself. Like, everything is conscious. Everything has its own energy center. Everything has its own awareness to it. And seeing plants and other animals that were vibrating with this frequency, with my eyes wide open, was it was life changing, to say the least. And the experience that I was getting when I'd go to nature for hunts or to the beach or to on a hike on a mountain when I was out of town, like any of these things, it was a visceral, palpable feeling of peace. And I realized that is accessible to us if I can cultivate that. And we started cultivating it in my mom's backyard. When I was fighting, we lived in my mom's attached garage. I wasn't making any money in the UFC. And because of the beginning works with plant medicines, it's like, hey, can I put some plants in the ground? She's like, absolutely. What do you do? And I'm like, fruit trees, And then the next year I was like, can I do a raised bed? She's like, sure. What do you want to put? I'm like, I don't know, pumpkins, watermelon, that kind of stuff, broccoli. And we just started growing everything. And that, gardening was a great intro to it because, it's a lot like parenting in a way. Like you're taking something requires you or else it'll die. Like it requires your service to keep it alive. And there's fruits, there's rewards from that service. It gives back to you. And, those were kind of the seeds planted for that. Really the idea that I had behind Gardners of Eden was just that. I want to recreate the Garden of Eden. And it's not just in Lockhart. Right? Everyone who's doing regenerative in some way, shape, or form, everyone who's doing permaculture in some way, shape, or form, they are the Gardeners of Eden. It's us. It's us that are going to recreate that world. Arcadia, similar concept, right? Like you have, the garden, the fall from grace, and I don't want to get super religious, but it's the idea that we can return to that with the full gnosis and understanding of what we had to begin with. Mm-hmm. At first, there's an innocence. We have no idea how good it is, and we have to lose it. We have to have the fall to rebuild it and understand why we want it this way and what it means to live in harmony with nature. And I think that's what we're tracking now.
That's incredible. Just because for me personally, again, why I started this brand was I lost my brother to cancer and I watched that for 6 months. I was his caretaker. And then my mom also had just a hell of a long list of health issues to where she actually passed away the day this launched. And it took me those experiences to really wake up and realize how disconnected I've been. And then when I worked on that ranch or farm, which was 250 acres, that felt huge to me too. So on that topic of just the sheer land size, but it was just us out in the land. And that was the first time I've truly felt peace as well. And I can't explain it outside of I truly felt connected to the natural world for the first time in it. Outside of hiking, that's the only time I've really ever experienced that in my life. And again, that's why I try to push people to have these conversations with farmers and ranchers and potentially go visit, because it's one of those things, until you haven't experienced it yourself, you don't realize what you're missing. And I think that's a good segue into with Gardners of Eden too, because I've never talked to anyone with the nonprofit section, and it seems like you guys are really educational focused too. So I'd just love for you to expand more on why you took that route as well.
Yeah, there's many ways. You talked to Joel Salatin's a buddy, he's been on the podcast. There's many ways you can use a space to generate income. And, a lot of farmers, if they farm traditionally, we know it's the highest suicide rate out of any fucking job. You watch Kiss the Ground, Common Ground, it's an unfortunate statistic, but it's there because of the ever climbing debt that these guys get looped into with giant corporations and, involved in big agriculture and big chemistry, glyphosate, things like that. Even fucking John Deere tractors can put someone under, right? And so there's this never-ending need to produce more, similar to our economy, right? It has to grow or you fail, and eventually it fails for everyone that goes that route. In the regenerative model, as they show in Common Ground, one of the things I love, and I don't know if you've seen that yet, it's not on Netflix yet. Kiss the Ground is out already, but Common Ground is great because they show like you could save an average 3,500 acre grain farm would save $1 million a year in inputs alone. 1 million a year after year if they went to regenerative. And then you've got all the health benefits to the side of that: personal health, land health, soil health, animal health, all the other things. But circle back on the original question you had.
I was just curious just to hear more on the educational focus that seems.
Education, yeah. So many ways, you can generate income. We knew we weren't, I looked at our farm, it's 118 acres, and having seen biggest little farm was 200 acres. I know the guy, I have friends with Rylan Englehart who started Kiss the Ground and different people like that, good buddies with Taylor from Rome Ranch. They took a big loan to make that work, right? Mm-hmm. A huge loan, money we didn't have. And I thought about that. And I also thought, there's so much indigenous trees here and wildlife here. If we clear cut the fucking thing or burnt it to the ground to regenerate it fastest and then plant it out the way we wanted on a clean 118 acre canvas, we still don't have the money for the trees, the irrigation, and everything else we'd need to do that. And one of the main focuses I thought, because like you, I want people to know about this for their own health reasons, for anything. I spoke at What Good Shall I Do? Force of Nature's event last year. They got another one coming up probably after this podcast comes out. but every April they do this. And they said about a third of their people there are there for health and wellness. They're from various aspects, naturopathic doctors, biohackers, whatever, athletes. A third of them are there because they farm traditionally. They want to learn the new way, or the old way rather, in regenerative. And other people are just curious. They're curious about their health. They're curious about how can they be involved, and they just want a closer connection to everything, and they want to learn. Thinking about that, it's like people from all walks are coming into this, trying to learn for various reasons. And one of the things that stuck out to me was, all right, meditating on it, I'm like, I'm not going to burn and kill off all this stuff. But the guy who had the land before us, he had a 9-acre, not a wildlife preserve. It was he got his ag exemption because he had 6 cows and 9 acres of wildflowers. And the 9 acres of wildflowers was flat, it was pristine, but he never sprayed fertilizer and he never sprayed chemicals on his land. So we really lucked out doing soil tests at A&M. And we decided that 9 acres was plenty. I met a guy, Chad Johnson, who's a Sepp Holzer understudy. He's done one of our educational plans is with him. And so I want to have him out more and more, but he's a brilliant dude. He's traveled the world with Sepp. Sepp's, for people that aren't familiar, just, he's on the Mount Rushmore of this stuff. And you read his book, Permaculture, you learn so much from it. I love that book. One of my favorites in the space. But Chad, too, is a visionary. And I told him, I want people to come here and be inspired and know, hey, I can do this on my little piece of land. And so we're only using 3.5 acres for our food forest. It's 400 fruit and nut trees. It's this beautiful spiral waterway where everything, eventually all root systems will lead back to that spiral. We've got ducks and geese, waterfowl, just inseminating that with the best nutrients for the trees. And these beautiful berms. So rolling hills. There's a couple trees the chickens have made their favorite, which have like more fruit on them than anyone else. And I was like, I don't know. Like duck poop and geese poop is cold poop, right? So plants can use it immediately. I don't know how it's going to be with all this hot chicken shit underneath it. And it's like the best tree on the land. But we got 100 plus chickens there. And that's like the bird center as well. It's one Great Pyrenees watching them, and we're going to add a couple puppies in for them. We've got bees there, just so people would see, like, hey, you might not be able to purchase 100 acres. You might not be able to purchase 50 or 20. You can do this on 3 acres, and you could do it smaller even on 1 without question. You could do that on 1 acre. And I think for people to see that, it becomes more real to them, because some people have big dreams about doing this on larger land, but in many ways, that's hard to get to. Like we're in another recession, and not sure that that's going to go away anytime soon. We may see the collapse of the dollar in the next 10 years. Like there's a lot of shit like that, not to be a doomer, but there's a lot of stuff like that that's kind of lingering. And also at the same time, you see a lot of people coming together to say, if we apply all our wealth together and we each build a little house on this place and we split it, and then we all tend the land, do we have enough manpower? We have enough money to do it? And there's all these examples like Gardners of Eden that are showing us this is how easy it is to do. So education was a huge one. We had already been in that space through Fit for Service, and seeing how many people were into this as I was talking about health and wellness and the importance of knowing your farmer and the importance of eating locally and supporting those systems. A lot of people naturally were inclined already to come out and volunteer and be a part of our programs, and some of which have already purchased land and are already doing this. Another one of our Fit for Service members is from the tech side, really working hard on lean-tos. So a lean-to greenhouse that's going to be half the cost or a third of the cost of a regular greenhouse, and how you do vertical farming within that. And then how do you, use aquaponics to feed back into that naturally, so you're not buying organic fertilizer and different things like that. So it's been really cool for me to see different people be affected by it and then find their own path, because there's a million ways to look in that, and we're trying everything that works. Even, our animals, we had about 24 cows, and we got a bunch of sheep. And after the 2-year drought, we realized our cows are losing weight. They look like Costa Rican cows. We're supplementing with food. They're happy, but they're not gaining the way we want them to. So we sold all our cows, and beef prices are a lot right now. So we just poured that right back into more sheep. And even through the drought, the sheep harvest has been insane, like the most beautiful yellow fat and full of carotenoids and vitamin A and happy, healthy sheep and healthy lambs. And that's an incredible food source too, because, one of Sepp Holzer's principles is see a need, fill a need. If no one has the market cornered on a particular thing, it could be you, right? If you specialize in one thing and sell it to a few restaurants nearby, that can start to generate income very well for you than trying to do everything. And he uses, like crawfish as an example, or, different types of specialty flours and things like that. So as far as I know, we're the only people really trying to do at scale regenerative sheep, and there's some other people in the game, one of the guys who we've learned through is a guy named Austin Dillon, the regenerative renegade, Counterculture Farms. And Taylor introduced us. That's who we got our sheep from, so he's doing that at scale, but really trying to get other farmers involved. We want to do this, find the maximum that our land can hold that's sustainable. And then from there, use that as an income generator so people can buy regenerative ground lamb at the store nearby and rack a lamb and different things of that nature. So it does take a while to get the farm up to being fiscally responsible and able to take care of itself. And we're very blessed to have this lag time available for us to get shit going. But one of the ways to supplement with that is to run the education. Like our fruit trees, our food forest isn't going to be really functioning for 7 years, maybe 5 more years till everything's popping and doing well. And there's stuff we can grow in the meantime. Our strawberries sucked year one. They're phenomenal right now. Every day you got to go out and pick handfuls of them or else the birds get to them. But you can go pick them every morning before the birds get to them. And it's like, that's one row of a 450-foot market garden is strawberries. And it's more than we can eat. Like we could do a whole field like that. Strawberries grow really well. So really, in this early part from our own education standpoint, it's seeing what produce does extremely well on our land. Like Idaho potatoes, there's something, or Gilroy garlic. There's something that's going to grow in our soil perfectly. And then that's where we can corner the market on and say, like, this is what we produce and become known for that. So we're still in that feeling out stage to figure out what that looks like. We have another 5 acres protected in our 9 acres. So we have big game fence around the outsides for exotics. And we have a smaller game fence that's 8 feet around the 9 acres so we can protect our trees and the birds and whatnot. And like I said, using 3.5 acres of that, there's another 5.5 acres that we can plan to plant stuff out using hugelculture or a variety of means from SEP and different people to really, expand whatever it is that we're going to do from a produce side.
You said hugelculture?
Yeah, it's basically where you take a dead tree. So anything from a dead tree to wood chips. If you spread wood chips down, those break down the fastest. So you build a mound or a berm over the dead tree or over the wood chips. And the deader the tree is, the faster it'll break down. And the more chopped up it is, like wood chips, the faster that'll break down. And the newer the tree is, if you just sawed it and it was still wet and you laid it down, that's going to last up to 10 to 15 years. So you lay these trees down in a line. This is all in his book, Permaculture. You build the berm over it, that has the soil of your land mixed with whatever it needs to balance out. So for us, we've got a lot of clay, and we bring in sandy loam from Bastrop in different places to help that open up. And then we compost the top. We found the largest organic mushroom distributor in Texas. And they have, we bought 30,000 pounds of their compost. It was truckload after fucking truckload coming in. I was like, we'll take all of it. Thank you. And that stuff's magic sauce. I mean, it really takes off quickly from there. We're doing our own compost. We have roaming chickens that have a couple coops. And then we have this big coop cathedral where it's all pine chips and shavings down. And twice a week we clean that out. That goes back into our compost with all the other food scraps and everything. And that turns over very quickly into usable compost. So there's different ways that we're participating in that, biochar, I'm sure you talked about things of that nature, but we want the thing to feed back into itself. And as Daniel Griffith says, to be sustainable and regenerative, we want to use as few inputs as possible. And that's another reason we moved away from the cows and went to strictly sheep.
So, man, that's awesome. There's so much awesome stuff that you're doing with all this. I'm just curious, whenever you first started, did you have like a big plan going on, or did you just dive in and then just figure it out as you go? And then as you're seeing the land, you're like, oh, I can do this, or what was that process like?
It was a few things. I mean, one, it was pure panic. Like when we acquired the land, big prayers, this is awesome, we got it. And then, oh shit, I'm the guy in charge. And I know the why to eat this way, but I don't know how to fucking grow it. I don't know anything about that. I've put 20 trees in the ground, 50 trees in the ground my entire life. And, really had to sit with that all of 21. And I brought those questions to some of the plant medicine ceremonies I was in, and it just continued to remind me, you're already connected to the experts. And as I started to embody that and think about it, one by one, I started getting introduced to people. And had a friend introduce me to Daniel Griffith, who's an Alan Savory guy. And Griffith has been our main animal management program. Holistic management via savory is one of the things we practice via the sheep and the cows. And that's been incredible. And he's been out to our farm and we've been out to his. And, we did a 5-day class with him. We're going to learn EOV through him, and really dive in that deeper to that so we can be a hub in Texas and help with that. That aspect of regenerative. And then I got introduced to Chad Johnson, as I mentioned, Sepp Holzer understudy via Jim Gale, who has Food Forest Abundance, and he's really big. Anything he does that's over 10 acres, he brings Chad in for. So the bigger projects Chad comes in to work on. And we become very close with Chad. And from there, there's books. There's Richard Perkins' book, it's just like a goddamn textbook. It's so thick. It costs as much as a textbook too, but highly, highly worth it, highly beneficial. We got a keyline plow. Chapter 5 in that book, the whole chapter's on keyline plow. And so if there's anything you want to learn, you can flip to a page in that book and say, how do I build my own mobile chicken coop? Here you go. You could look that up on YouTube for free, but this is from one of the masters of the game, a living legend in this space, from permaculture to regenerative. He does it all. And, ongoing education. We've got a plant manager, an animal manager, and a general manager, operations guy. Our plant manager is constantly doing ongoing education. And one of those is taking one of the Richard Perkins master classes. So thinking about that, having this connection to people when I first started, it was pure panic. Once I got in with these guys and I was like, oh, you traveled the world for the last 30 years. I can't get 30 years of knowledge overnight, but you have that. Let me stand on the back of, let me stand on the shoulders of giants and allow your expertise to come in and shape the way we map this out. And so we've been very fortunate, and that's the give back. That's a part of the education piece that I want. Not many people know who Chad Johnson is, or Sepp Holzer for that matter. Not many people know who Daniel Griffith is, or Alan Savory for that matter. But once you find out about these people, you're probably not going to get to sit with Alan Savory. You're probably not going to get to sit with Sepp Holzer. But if you can sit with one of their best students, and you can come to the middle of the country to learn from them, that's what we want to do. We want to invite people in. We want to spread the good word. And let people know, not just our wins, but our losses. We did a lot of things stupid in the first year and had to learn. And that's the beautiful and the hard thing about nature. Nature's metal. Like, you're going to fucking find out really quick that life and death is inherently intertwined and regenerative.
Could you give an example of something that happened in the first year?
Yeah. So we brought in sheep, and we had this really nice game fence put in, $140,000 for this 8-foot fence with barbed wire on the top. And, it encircles the whole thing. And we've got another smaller one protecting the food forest. And we paid a guy to come out and, trap a bunch of hogs because we knew hogs would be really bad for the system. Let's get them out. And if a couple stay, cool, we can hunt later. We love eating hog. But there's 25 hogs there when we started. I don't want to start, put the game fence in and trap all those guys there. If they left, cool. If they stayed, let's get them out. So we trapped them. And then we brought our sheep in first. And I think we might have brought the cows in with them, but either way, we got our animals out there. We're probably the only farm in Texas that put food on the land without protection. And I think about that for a second, right? Like, we brought a lot of food outdoors and it's making noise and it smells yummy to predators and there's no protection for it. And so, one night very early, we lost 6 sheep in a night. And it was a holy shit moment. And we walked the perimeter. There was 27 holes from where coyotes had dug in. Wow. 27 holes. And I was like, okay, this fence is meaningless as protection. And I got night vision goggles and all sorts of shit to just go on a coyote killing spree. $9,000 thermal on my AR, just all kinds of stuff. We stayed out there. We went in teams of 2. Every day we'd rotate and go twice a week. And there's no time off for about 6 weeks protecting our animals. Never once had a shot on a coyote. They'd be hooting and hollering 20 deep on our land, but just behind the tree line where it has its own infrared signature. So you can't see them in there. Right?
That's crazy.
Highly, highly intense. And I learned a lot about them. And, being a hunter, I still respect the fuck out of other predators and really respect these coyotes much more than I used to. But one of the things I found out along the way is if there was 20 animals in a unit and you kill 18 of them and there's 1 male and 1 female left, that female will go into estrus the next day and can get pregnant that quick, and she will hold as many in her litter as necessary to rebound the entire pack.
Oh my gosh.
Not saying she could do 20 at once, but she would max out, and she'd get pregnant right after that and max out again. Right? Like, that's amazing when you think about an animal's ability to do that. Right? Like, that's insane to think about that. So the best thing to do with coyotes isn't to try to kill them off. You can't. You cannot kill them off. The best thing is to bring in the right protectors, where now a coyote can still be on our land. It can still do its job. It can hunt possum and other things and other raccoons and things that we don't want killing our chickens. But we have to protect, what we want to protect. And so we went and got some livestock guardians. We've got 6, actually 4 Great Pyrenees, and we've got a few mixes, Anatolian mixes, and we've got a bunch of puppies we're actually looking to get rid of, all purebred Pyrenees. So, the dogs have been phenomenal, and you can see this is what they live for. Yep. They'll sleep during the day. They're still super people friendly, but one of them we have, James, is an Anatolian. Most male dogs will circle the perimeter, and the females stay in the pack with the animals. And this dog is a male, James. He's within 5 feet of every delivery. He's a fucking midwife, and sometimes a sheep will get up, a ewe will get up and stomp her feet hey, too close, and he'll back up without turning away from her. He'll just back up is this okay, and sit down? No, we all stand up and move back a couple more feet. Is this okay? And then she's fine. He's as close as the mom allows. Does it with our cows, does it with everybody. And just a perfect dog to have. He was the only older dog we bought. He was 4 when we got him, and didn't come from a great place either. So it was really nice how that worked out for him. But all of our dogs get to learn from him. He's the very best.
With the coyotes too, and do you still have any problems with wild hogs? Because I started reading more on that and just realizing how much of a problem that is in Texas.
It's a huge problem. I mean, they're I forget who I had on, Jake Muse or somebody. When they were brought here, on the old Spanish ships, they brought a dozen of them or something, or 2 dozen, and left them off in the woods, and they spread across the continent.
Fast.
It's amazing to think of that. Again, thinking of how the coyotes work, but how the hogs went was just masters, pure mastery there. And I love the taste of wild hog. That said, they are incredibly damaging to a regenerative operation. And a lot of my buddies are out hunting hogs. They've got low fence, and that's something that they're doing consistently with. We haven't really had an issue with them at all on our land. And we do, we want to hunt the land. It's small and it's high fence. I get that. It's more of a harvest than a hunt, having been to, 5,000 acres open land in Hawaii or Molokai, in different places where it's a real spot and stock hunt, or different places in Texas where it's 1,500 acres. It's just a bigger land to be with. 118 acre high fence is for sure. We're not shooting off feeders, but it is for sure a harvest. It's a smaller operation, not that intense. But, we've got whitetail. We brought in black buck. We brought in red deer. And, we rotate our domestics so that way we can regenerate the land, and we have these other exotics there that just are a part of it that will eventually hunt as they get higher in number. So we enjoy that aspect of it, and at the same time, hogs really hasn't affected us that much. Sometimes we got a buddy with a local ranch that needs help support, and we'll go out and hunt hogs then, but hasn't been a factor for us, thankfully.
Yeah, I just remember first reading it. I think we need to kill off 70% of the annual population just to keep it under control. Which is just because also, like you were mentioning with coyotes and their insane birth rates, that's the same for hogs. How quickly they can repopulate is just wild. Just wanted to transition a little bit with the educational piece. I'm curious because then you also mentioned going to Rome Ranch for a harvest, and with your sheep, do you do any type of education around harvesting on the day for them? Absolutely.
So we've got a buddy, Jared Holmes, who is kind of the guy at Rome Ranch, and Taylor introduced us. He's been out to our ranch for a couple harvests. Great dude. He's a biologist by day, regenerative agriculture by hobby, and I shouldn't say hobby, but that's his passion, right? By vocation, he's into regenerative. And he also happens to be a phenomenal butcher. He can tell you every part of the animal. He can tell you what would be missing if you had a grocery store cut versus what you get when you're doing it yourself. And he's come out. We did a steer on the land, I think 1 or 2, and we've had I don't know if we did a sheep yet with him. We did emu with him. We had a couple emus, and one was really salty, so we ate him. That's the best way to deal with him. He will be our guy. What we want to do from an education standpoint, because we're trying to find this happy medium. We did a pretty big class with Chad Johnson, all on permaculture and sepulture stuff, and we didn't really fill that class out and realize, Fit for Service is a brand a lot of people know. So there's still a lot of people that don't know us, but you go to fitforservice.com. The website's gorgeous. There's a ton of testimonials. We've been doing it for 5 years and have helped thousands of people. So people understand that when they get there, it's like, oh, they've been in the game for a while. They go to gardnersofeden.earth. It's your bare basic minimum website. There's not a ton of offerings on there. And really, part of it's doing podcasts like this where we can grow that brand, get people's awareness there, and then do smaller events that cost way less, because Chad's event, unfortunately, it didn't break even. We lost our ass on that event, and we do want to offer more with Chad. I want to offer a bunch with Daniel Griffith as well. But those, big name guys have bigger costs associated, and we got to fill those classes in. That just requires a bit more marketing and getting people aware of us. So the happy medium, I think, is bringing in a guy like Jared and doing field harvests just like Rome Ranch does. And those could be free even, like they do that at Rome Ranch. They have a community field harvest of a bison. If you've never field dressed an animal and you get a chance to field dress a bison, it's a fucking experience. It is a giant, giant being. And you can learn so much from it because of the size of it. You really have a lot of opportunity to have a great education in doing so. Sheep and lamb are obviously much smaller, and I think it might be a bit challenging for people to field dress a lamb. Right now we do work, with the USDA, that way we can sell that meat. And so taking in all our lamb to the USDA for processing is what we do, but we do field harvests with bigger ones. And we had a ram that actually hurt himself. So we separated our rams from the ewes. So that way we could time the reproduction schedule and get everyone in the spring. And one of them got spooked and headbutted this steel post and knocked itself out. And we were like, what the fuck, right? And it was hilarious. And it was like, damn, he hit that thing hard. And when he woke up, he couldn't stand. So he messed his spine up in his neck somewhere where now he couldn't stand. He could kick his legs frantically, but he couldn't stand up. And so we gave him a day to get better, and he didn't get better. So we harvested him on the land. And that was just out of need. Sometimes you have to cull an animal. His meat was still flawless. There was nothing wrong with him other than that one instance. But we learned a lot from that too. We have the only place, because of the rolling hills and all the trees, that we get to irrigate is our food forest. And we have a few pastures that are fairly open, lots of grass, but they're at the high point of the land. So they're not able to grab all this water yet. And, we're going to put in swales and rainwater collection and do a lot of things to make sure we can harvest more of that water and harness it for the places we can irrigate. But as for now, there's only one place, and that's the food forest. And putting, the only no spray hay we could find to top dress these berms, Holzer style, was Johnson grass. And in the Johnson grass were tons of Johnson seeds. So now as we water that and it gets sunlight, the berms will have 8-foot tall grass, right? And so we got a scythe and we're out there just chopping like the Grim Reaper every 2 weeks, just nonstop, can't keep up with it. And our plant manager was like, let's roll the sheep in and see if they'll just eat the grass and not mess with the trees, because the trees are young. We don't want them to destroy them. Sure enough, we do that. There's guys who are just pounding grass. So we realized, all right, cool, they won't touch the trees. They'll only eat the grass, and then we rotate them out. And because supplementing with hay is one thing. It's what you have to do to keep them alive during a hot summer. But if you can get them something green, far better. And so this ram had actually been in the food forest the whole time. And when we harvested him, we saw how much darker his meat was. I mean, he was bright red on the interior, and his fat was super yellow because he never came off the green grass. And that was why we decided to rotate them in and see if they'd not mess with the trees. And so we learned a lot from that. We also learned that if we can, because we're going to be irrigating that, how important it is to have some places irrigated that we can get them green food in the summer will make a dramatic difference in the quality of the meat. And so huge blessing, that he took his life in that way. And, it will make a big difference in the way that we, work with our animals going forward.
That whole story is why I also love agriculture, because it's not a one size fits all, but it's also just a lot of testing it out to see what happens. And then you learn an insane amount what works and what might not work. I'm curious with, I lost my train of thought.
It's all right. Let me just mention something. There's something that popped in my head on the testing it and figure it out. That is holistic management. That's holistic management 101. I love books where you read on a particular subject and then it expands out to literally everything. In Alan Savory's book on holistic management, he says you make a plan. That's number one. Number two, expect the plan to go wrong. Expect something to happen where it goes wrong. Number three, observe the plan. Number four, based on your observations of something having gone wrong, remake the plan and start over from one. So it's like you're constantly in this loop of this is the best thing we can do now, and we'll figure out where it's going to go wrong. But you expect that. So it's not like, oh God, this thing happened, I couldn't believe it. Like, no, you expect something to go wrong. And when it does, that helps you learn and you get better each time. That's holistic management. So I think that's an important tool I learned for agriculture that I apply to literally everything in my life now, and it's taken a huge burden off of needing to be perfect. When you expect something to go wrong, that alleviates that stress. And then, all right, this is going to help us make it better.
Yeah, because then that would just be nonstop. You're just yelling, getting more angry, and it's just it's going to end in a disaster. But now I remember going back to, you mentioned once they had some green grass, how much darker the meat was. Can you explain that relationship?
Yeah, so beta carotene things are in plants. We know that carotenoids are in things with color, right? And particularly, I first noticed this too because we work with a guy, Strick Dairy Farm is 100% A2 Jersey cows that are 100% grass-fed, grass-finished. It's the best raw milk. Here, you got to make raw milk hat again. Best raw milk in Texas. We found a third-generation cheesemaker from Venezuela who's awesome, and he only works with that milk as his milk source for his cheese. And Dos Lunes is the name. You can find it at different places here in town. Phenomenal cheese source. And one of the things we saw, like looking at his choices, was like, why is that one super yellow and why is that one super white? And he said the white one came from when the grass was dry. The yellow one came from when the grass was green and we had lots of rain. Right? So even the carotenoids are coming through mom's milk, and you'll see that as it's dehydrated down into cheese, the more yellow it is, the more vitamin A is in there. What most people don't understand is that all animals have the ability to convert beta carotene into vitamin A. 50% of the US population here cannot. So I can eat carrots until I'm orange and I won't take beta carotene and turn that into vitamin A. My mom can't, Aubrey can't, a bunch of people that I work with have the same genetic polymorphisms. So with that, vitamin A being a critical component for cell replication and immune function, I can't get it from carrots. I can't get it from sweet potatoes. I can't get it from yellow and red bell peppers. I can only get it from an animal source. And that's going to come through organ meat. That's going to come through egg yolk. It's going to come through cod liver oil, a variety of different ways, but it has to be animal source. That's 50% of the US population. So when people get into the plant-based arguments, it's like half of us can't even fucking entertain that idea. We'd die if we did. Let's just allow that to be, to set the table before we start talking about plants versus animals. But all these ruminants are designed to take every nutrient from the soil, from the sun, from the water, from the land of that area, and break it down and put on the most bioavailable nutrition possible. Even when you talk about spinach, and has a high level of iron, and there's magnesium in cacao and all of the nutrients you would find in plants. I'm not a carnivore guy. However, all of those plant minerals, some of them our body can't even break down at all. They're the wrong size. The plant could break it down. It doesn't mean we can break it down. But when we eat an animal who's already taken that and broken it down for us, now it becomes bioavailable. Now all of a sudden we have ability to access everything that animal has. And if we're eating nose to tail, that's going to require liver and kidneys and different things like that, heart. Then we're really going to get to the nutrient-dense stuff that animal has in it.
I'm curious, for folks that visit, have you ever had any vegans or more plant-based folks? Because I was vegan for 2.5 years, and it was in 2021 where I switched back. And I'm just curious if you've had any of these conversations on your farm.
I've had conversations like this through Fit for Service because, there's a spiritual community in that. Those are, it's not hard when you're addressed with the facts. It's hard if you just have an argument, right? So if my argument is humans are healthier eating meat than they are just eating plants, or if my argument is no culture throughout history has ever decided to eat only plants, right? If that's an argument, that might be a true argument, but it doesn't really speak to the why behind it, right? So you look at Weston A. Price, who circled the globe, and I break this down as well in some of these classes, but Weston A. Price was a dentist in the 1930s who circled the globe, and he looked at all indigenous cultures before they were introduced to food and after they were introduced to standard American diet. And before, these guys had perfect teeth. A lot of them didn't have a word for cancer or stroke, heart attack, or arterial sclerosis. None of those words existed in their language because they didn't exist in them. And the diets ranged. So if you were near the equator, like a pygmy tribe in Africa, they had no winters. Right? They had access to carbohydrates year round. They had much darker skin. And And if you were further towards the poles, you had hard winters. You didn't have smaller animals. The animals you had were large and fatty, whether they're in the ocean or on land, and you went through carbohydrates seasonally. That's where preservation comes in. Can I store the autumn, can I take all these apples that come together in autumn and make apple butter and different things that'll last? Can I dehydrate them and have something of a food source through the winter? And so one of the things he looked at was the Pygmy tribe that survived mostly on yams. About 90% of their calories came from yams. The other 10% came from bugs, grubs, things like Timon and Pumbaa and Lion King, right? They came from insects because they still needed an animal source protein. Flip that on its head. Really high north, you get the Inuit tribe that's 80% whale and sea blubber. And do they eat carbs? No. 10 months of the year, but 2 months of the year when there's wild blueberries and things growing in the ground, do they eat it? Absolutely they do, right? So there's an opportunistic omnivore in every one of us. And we know, John Fire, Lame Deer, he wrote Lame Deer Secret Visions, awesome guy, Lakota elder. He talked about eating pemmican 3 squares a day. That pemmican changed year round. It was always bison with bison fat, but they would add in whatever seasonally grew. If there was berries, that got added into the pemmican. If there was herbs, that got added into the pemmican, and preserves. So that's what they'd have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they'd only eat big meals and soups when there was festivals and dances and things of that nature. So, and that sustained them healthily for a very long time before coffee and refined, Chet calls them the 4 devils: refined flour, refined sugar, processed milk, and table salt, refined salt, right? Those 4 will kill you. So I think it's worth noting things like that. But we have had questions like that, and having sat with ayahuasca quite a few times, like there's a time and a place to trim out and just be plant-based in order to prepare myself for an experience like that. But that is not, from a health standpoint, that's the worst thing I could do for my body long term. And that also applies to 50% of the population, according to the stats on what we now know about human DNA.
This is what I love about education, but also going back to the animal harvest, because, again, we've been so disconnected from where our food comes from. So I was vegan for 2.5 years, and then a year later, I was traveling and visiting ranches. And the very first ranch I visited, we did a whole chicken harvest. And I just remember I wasn't there for the whole process. I wasn't there for when they were raising the chickens or any of that nature, but I was there on the final day and watching the farm owner. He kind of did an interesting ceremony, but just seeing the respect given towards these animals, but then having that fresh chicken afterwards was, again, I can't put that experience to words, just how much more connected I felt. And I just felt more connected to all of that, because I went vegan in the first place because of factory farming, like a lot of others that went that route. That's horrific. But then once I started learning about this way of agriculture and actually working on the farm and seeing how they treat the animals with respect, they care for these animals. They will literally go out in the middle of the night, whether it's snow, rain, whatever. If they're sick, they'll be right next to them, taking care of them. And so that really, really changed my perception of food for sure, but just also just our environment. And that's, again, why I think education is so critical, because a lot of us have just gone our whole lives just getting food from a grocery store, and that's it. And a lot of people will go their whole lives and die to where they've never visited a farm, and we've never been like that until now. And I don't know, it's just really crazy and interesting. But this is also why I love social media. With Instagram, for example, the regenerative agriculture homesteading on their communities are just huge and only growing, to where I can really see a culture shift in a way because of the pandemic and everything that's been happening. People are starting to really wake up to the very institutions that we're supposed to trust, whether it be healthcare or any of the other government institutions, and then pairing that with seeing how unhealthy this country is. So there's some disparity there, because now America is now 75% of this country is overweight, obese, or severely obese. It's so normalized. Nearly 75% of our food system is ultra-processed food, so it's literally food that did not exist 100, 200 years ago. And I feel like the only way to go back is through education and trying to get more folks in the space, because I think it's only 1.5% of this population works in agriculture that provides food for 100% of the population. And so that's why I think it's awesome, everything that you're doing and will be doing with Gardners of Eden and everything else. Yeah, that's really all I had for that. My next question, with that being said, do you remember the first day whenever you started working on the farm? And I'd be curious, what was that feeling like, if you remember that?
Yeah, there's a few of them I remember, a few firsts. One was, one was the first tree I got to put in the ground. And I'd planted trees before, but seeing, how the effort it took to move the land. And Sepp Holzer, again, he's like, he's kind of in a gray zone where, some people that are permacultures, like you work with the contours of the land, no machines, like it's almost like an Amish mindset. And he holds like, why wait? But it would take 20 years of manpower to do something we can do in 3 days with an excavator. Why not shape the earth in a way that we know is beneficial to it and create a new ecosystem? And so that's what we did with this big spiral. We pulled, 4 or 5 feet deep, maybe 5 yards wide, and we dug all that out. That aerated our topsoil and created our berms, and it gave us this little spiral waterway. And we had to plant, on both sides of the berm, these trees, and all of our fruit trees came in, and it was amazing seeing them all there. Some of them looked dead, some of them were dead, but like if you ever get one that's it's no root ball, it's just lying there in like a watery sponge kind of thing, and it's like, that thing's alive, holy shit, and then getting those into the ground, it was kind of it was a nonstop balls to the wall thing where it was like, we got to put 400 trees in, and it's going to take all of it. It's going to take all of us going all out. My dad came out for it. He was cutting down mesquite, sawing wood for 12 hours a day for 3 days straight at 72 years old. Like, everyone gave max effort. But I remember putting that first tree in the ground. My little kids are running around, and just the feeling is almost, it wasn't the same as catching a baby. That's the whole thing in and of itself. But it felt kind of like that. Like, this is just the beginning. Anybody who has a parent, you catch a kid and you're like, holy shit, I got to take care of you now. Like, I got to keep you alive. Like, this is awesome. You're healthy, and it's only just begun. And so I felt that, this is just the beginning. It felt like that when I was putting the tree in the ground. But also, we have land. We're putting trees in the ground. We're doing the right thing. And that was a powerful moment. Another powerful moment was the first time we brought our animals in and seeing them, from especially the red deer. We'd bring them in on a trailer. Everyone stands back, and they run in at seven does, 2 spikes, and 1 champion. And the champ comes in on his own. I was just like, wow. He just stands and looks at his, look like Harry Potter's Patronus, like just pure majestic animal. And anytime I'm walking the land, if I come across them, we will stop and stare. Like the whitetail will bolt. They've been used to being hunted in Texas, but black buck come up right to our house. We just moved in April 1st. We've been building out there for over a year, and they can't see us through the glass in our living room. So they'll come up 20 yards to the house, and sometimes they'll bounce around and play and frolic, and sometimes they'll just sit and eat. Those are special encounters that I can't get anywhere else. But I think the animals coming to the land really made it feel special, because knowing the relationship between animals and the soil and the relationship between animals and man, it was like, now we have the ability to regenerate. Now we have the ability to tend the land. Now we have the ability to recreate the Garden of Eden. And you don't have that without animals. You're still buying everything else from someone else's farm, all these inputs from soil to compost to you name it, to get it to that place. Our chickens, we had 38. We were still living in Austin at the time where our house was being built. We got 40 chickens online shipped to the local. I remember the phone call from the post office saying, hey, is this you? You got chickens? You got to come pick them up. We can't keep these. And I was like, I'll be right there. I come, there's a box full of 40 fucking chicks. 2 die on the impact, on the drive, but 38 live. And we basically get this horse trough, my wife and I, we raise them indoors in our living room downstairs. And every morning she and I walk this out. We set up a chicken run on our 1/10 of an acre backyard. And, we let them out in the run, and then I got to clean all that out. For fucking 6 weeks, I did this morning and evening, right? And even though we've added 100 chickens since, Like those are our old girls. Those are the ones that we had from the jump. 3 roosters from there. Those are our old boys. Like they lived with us. My kids got to raise them. Fastest growing ones would jump to the top and then jump down and come sit on my little girl's lap while we're eating breakfast. It's like, and obviously there's sanitation things, concerns you might have and not want them eating your food. But it was remarkable to see the friendliness and the personality of each of the different chickens, and I think that was a huge connection too. Like, we're not on the land yet full time, but we're still taking on full-time duties that are going to help provide for the land. And now that we are on the land full time, it's pretty special too. Chores are such a big deal for kids. One of my favorite books on parenting is The Collapse of Parenting by Dr. Leonard Sachs. And he speaks at length about this, but, my son's about to turn 9, and this morning before the podcast, he was out with my wife mucking the chicken stall, cleaning it out, spreading fresh pine shavings, and we bring a big bucket of leftovers for the chicken once or twice a week and dump that down. So every time we go in there, 100 chickens start running behind us thinking we got food, whether we have food or not. And it's hilarious because they'll follow us anywhere. But, I can't, I know people who grew up on farms and speak to that impact. People like Paul Check, who's a mentor and a very close friend. And I know guys that are doing it for the first time, like Taylor. Taylor didn't grow up. He's a city boy like me, and he's raising his kids out on Rome Ranch. And I can't really fathom the gift that will be for them, but I can see it in bits and pieces, and that's a really special thing to be able to give to them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I was born in a city that similar population was about 110,000, and long term, I definitely want to have my ranch, and whenever I have a family, have that on a ranch too, just because when I worked on a farm, they had kids, I believe, like 6, 3, and 1, and just seeing them interact, and they want to help out, and just how they interact with the land and the animals, it is a joy to watch. I'd be curious too, with the land too, and only the few years you've been on there, have you noticed a change in landscape or just more nature? Because it reminds me of Will Harris. Before he switched to regenerative agriculture practices, he mentioned every day he'd always look outside for something to kill. And then whenever he changed that in his book, A Bold Return to Giving a Damn, he mentions how just all of a sudden he realized all of the nature that he grew up with is finally back. And so I'm curious, in those couple of years, have you noticed more changes, I guess, through that?
Absolutely. So this is our second spring, since tending it. And it's unquestionable, even walking the land with Daniel Griffith, like the height of the grass, how much grass. And thank God we had big rains this winter. It came in and restored all 3 of our ponds. And but the land's ability to hold that, when it floods, isn't entirely dependent upon how well we regenerate ahead of time before the rains come. And what we found now is like the growth rate of the grass is all over the land. We got this wonderful, they call it bastard cabbage. It's like a yellow flower that's kind of similar to broccolini, and our sheep love to eat the leaves, but there's just yellow and giant blue sea of the blue bonnets all over the land right now. And all of our bees are going crazy. I mean, there's so much food for them. And, we planted a bunch of red buds all over the land. And so there's so much food in the spring for them. And we want to continue to add different things for the pollinators, but way more dragonflies, way more butterflies. Like I said, the grass is way higher than it's ever been before. The ground does feel different. We've been running tests. We've already doubled our organic content in the soil inside a year. So we're right on track with guys like Rome Ranch, and we want to map that and continue it. And there's different ways to track. We're using technology as well. Daniel Griffith hooked us up with this really cool company where you fly a drone over and it'll do like every 2 inches. So it maps in this giant grid form. The drone flies back when you need to switch batteries, pops back up to the exact location it left off, and it finishes till it finishes your grid. And then you run that through the app, and it'll show through the app where there was infrared, and where there's infrared means new growth. So I can see right after everyone leaves a pasture, how fast is that growing back in the summer when there's no rain? How fast is it growing back when there are rains, right? And it's really remarkable to be able to see, because it takes a lot of the guesswork out. But, just from a personal or a spiritual level, being able to watch, it's night and day difference in 1 year. And I think that's something that's really cool. You get out of nature's way and give it what it wants, and nature's response is exponential to what we think it'll be.
Where would you, I don't know if this is the right question to ask, if saying that all that change in 1 year, where would you like Garden of Eden to be in, say, 5 years?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell in 5 years. I don't know where the hell I'm going to be in 5 years. You know, like all that. I always laughed at the 5 year question because so much happens in between.
That's why I didn't know if it was.
You know, when I was fighting up until I retired at 32, if you asked me where I'll be in 5 years, I would have said fighting. Never thought I would have retired at 32. 5 years ago, probably wouldn't have said I'd be on a farm. You know, but 2020 happened and all these other things happened, and so I'm open to anything happening. As far as the farm is concerned, though, it's also hard to map that because of the exponential growth of it. It's not linear. And I think, you know, the more that we continue to learn and holistically manage and continue to better our practices, and the more that we learn through these other great guys like Perkins and Griffith and different people like that, Johnson, our education is it's at the speed of nature, which is very fast and very slow, right? Like in a day, you could lose a large percentage of your animals. In a day, you know, we lost one of our sprinkler systems wasn't working in 2 weeks during the drought. We lost 50 trees because of that. So there's hard lessons to learn from quickly, and at the same time, though, you really do get to see that what you're doing is working. You know, and just like that one tree, the chickens decide to make home base. All the old chickens we raised at our house, it's covered in peaches, and it's fucking twice as big as any other tree. And it's like, apparently peaches love chicken shit. Like that's good. You know, that's a really good thing. And it's just interesting to see, like I'm in a place of curiosity more than I am in a place of expectation. And you know, all of our pomegranate fruited the first year they were in. You know, and we're told, like, don't expect fruit for 3 years. Everything's got to root and get settled. Pomegranates, we're like, no, we're going to cover ourselves in pomegranates. So year after year, we've got it's my least favorite fruit at all of them, but that's one that just loves its home. So we also did Japanese yams. My son was pulling them out last harvest, and you know, they were as big as like a soccer ball. Never seen Japanese yams that big in my life. Like, wow, dude, the ground, you know, this is a perfect growth center for that. So I'm curious to see, you know, in 5 years, as we continue to experiment, what is the thing that takes off? What becomes like our go-to? I'm curious to see which trees continue to thrive at a fast rate, you know, and which parts of the land are really sustainable. We have about 3 different ecosystems on our land, you know, because that changes from 510 feet elevation down to 450, but as it slopes down, there's a pocket of old trees right next to Dry Creek. And so these are, you know, 100-foot tall plus elms and oaks and just it's an old forest, you know, that's on the back corner of our lot. And, you know, the deer are always hanging there when it's hot, right? It's cooler. There's an ephemeral pond that fills up only when it rains. And like that's got water in it for them. And it's a really cool, unique ecosystem. And then you go up higher and you start to see cactus and you know, mesquite and different trees like that. And so like, and then of course the food forest is its own thing. So I remain curious. And I also know that in 5 years, it'll be beyond whatever I expect today.
I love that. And this is also with just the 110 acre farm, you just painted a full picture of just the sheer diversity of just this plot of land. And that's way different than, say, a 110 acre plot in Indiana or Arizona. And I don't know, that's just so cool. And then just hearing you explain everything and just the symbiotic relationship with it all. Whenever you have the trees, it brings in the deer for shade. And I don't know, it's just really awesome. That's why I try to push people to go to these places if the farmers allow that, of course. Because it's just something that we've been so missing for so long. Going back to the point of life and death, because that's just so constant on the farm. I remember one day I was just doing farm chores and went into the turkey pen, and there was just a couple turkeys dead, and there's just a part of that. And for me, most of my adult life, I was agnostic, and after my brother died, made me start really rethinking everything. But then once I switched into agriculture and visited farms and worked on one and saw just how everything was connected, really brought me back to believing in a creator. So I'd be curious just to hear, because I know it's called Garden of Eden. Have you always had a religious background? And then what's that been like since starting into agriculture and just seeing the land every single day, has that? Yeah, I'd be curious to see if that's changed your world viewpoint at all, or what
Yeah,
that's been like.
it's reaffirmed my viewpoint. And I'll say, you know, growing up, didn't like Sunday school. You know, we went to a non-denominational Christian church. I had a lot of questions they didn't have answers for, and there was a lot that I disagreed with, you know, particularly on gay people burning in hell and shit. I was like, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense at all. Not to me, at least. And, you know, I could feel like there's been several points in my life where I could really feel a deeper connection to Creator, God, whatever you want to call that. And then through my work with plant medicines, really started to establish a connection there. And that also reestablished my connection to nature, which was odd to think about prior to that, but made perfect sense because of it, right? Like one of my favorite quotes is one from Paul Selig: all is over, nothing is. Either all is spirit or nothing is. And it's not to say I am God, but it is to say that we are all of the same source, everything. And everything has an interconnection and interwoven relationship. And there's no better place to see that than in nature, right? We can see the dots and connection points of all things interwoven in a way that works, right? When we look at ecosystems and study them, we can start to see there's a give and take. There's a level of reciprocity. You know, there's a Quechua word called Aini, and it's the law of reciprocity. And as we honor the law of reciprocity, everything wins. You know, when you look at a regenerative system, one of the things that stands out is like, there's no one part that suffers. Everything gets better. The soil gets better. The soil gets better at handling drought. It gets better at handling floods. It gets better at handling fires. It produces, you know, anything that grows there, from grass to trees to fruit and veggies to market garden stuff, it produces everything better. And anything that eats from it gets better. And anything that eats from the thing that ate from the land is better. And the air is better. And you can actually start to create an ecosystem in a way where you start to generate your own rain. This is where Rudolf Steiner was talking about. Most people will be like, you can't generate your own rain. Study Rudolf Steiner, study Sepp Holzer's stuff, you know, when he talks about hydrological balance, 100%. You start to create that level. And so, you know, we're not out there doing rain dances and shit, but understanding that I can start to have an impact in a way that changes this going forward is pretty remarkable. But I think, you know, to answer your question, I had that draw going into it from plant medicine experiences, but being on the land, it just reaffirmed it over and over and over again, the interconnectivity of all things. And what's been a head scratcher is wondering, you know, seeing how lost humanity is in that understanding, and just wondering how do we come back to that, you know, because it's one thing to say like, hey, this is a healthier way to eat, or this is a better way to shop, even though it costs more, whatever the fucking argument is. But until someone has that burning desire from within that lights them up to go be in that place, or the experience itself, you know, you go to a place like that and you actually have the awareness to say, I feel different. This feels amazing. How do I get more of that? If you don't have that experience, you're not going to know it, you know. And Salatin was great because he talked a lot about how there's 1 million plus people became homesteaders in the last 3 years, and there are 1 million more coming in the next 2, right? And most people get, you know, they might be, you know, homestead in 3 acres, they might do 30 or 300. But they get a year into it and they're like, oh shit, what did I do? You know, like I don't know how to, and then all the complications start and things of that nature. But one thing they don't do, you know, when their friends from the city call and they say like, oh, you can't get DoorDash, or you can't get Uber Eats, or you can't get all of these conveniences that I have. No one says we're moving back to the city. No one says we're going to throw in the towel and leave this. They say, hey, panic button, how do I make this better? But they don't say, how do I get back what I had before? And that's a really important thing to understand, because if you're stuck in a city and you're stuck in, you know, what I call games within games, you know, I quit playing video games after a mushroom journey because I realized every minute I spent in a video game was a minute I was playing a game within a game. And even amongst video games, which I loved, you play a game like Grand Theft Auto, you know, it has a mission, and then there's side missions or mini missions you can do that are just within the game. And I never wanted to do the mini missions because it was taking away from the actual game. Like I had that in me as a video game player. The second I made the understanding that the game of life is ever present, this is the infinite game, and I'm playing video games within the game, what the fuck am I doing that for? Right? And I think so much, even if you don't play video games, we get caught in the game of our reality. We get caught in the game of my work matters. I have to show up on time. My responsibilities matter. What would I do if Amazon couldn't deliver it to me prime the next morning? What would I do if I had to make my own food? Those are challenges you want to take on. Those are challenges that make life better. And, you know, if you're in Texas, like I still get fucking Amazon delivered. It might take a day or two instead of 4 hours, but we're still there, you know, like we're on grid, off grid. You don't know until you know, realistically. And I think part of it is conversations like this. Part of it is just having really cool events. You know, it's really helped. Fit for Service doesn't have anything to do with gardening, but we bring 200 people into our events on that space and people feel it. It's palpable. The difference, the vibration, the frequency of that land is different than anywhere else they've been to before. You know, you go to Sedona, same thing. You're like, wow, man, what is it? Is it the vortexes? Is it the land? Is it the people? What is it about Sedona that makes it that special? The energy there is different and you can feel it when you're sleeping. Same thing when you get to our land. And like, this is just the very beginning. It's in its infancy. So in 5 years and 15 and 30, all of that's going to be, you know, even more so. I had a guy who was a great mentor of mine, Dr. Will Tagle. He passed away a couple years ago. Author, PhD in psychology, PhD in physics. And he wrote the book Walking with Bears, one of my favorites. But he tended 40 acres in Wimberley for 25 years. And he actually brought flowing water back to his creek through regenerative practices. And that's mind blowing to me, you know, like mind blowing that he was able and working with different people within his town in Wimberley. And there was a feeling on his land that was different than any other place I had been to, right? It was calming. You know, I felt held and it opened me up. It allowed me to see outside the box. When we do a nature walk there, I could see shit that I could no idea, you know, like wrapping my head around questions for months. Go hang with him for 2 hours. And all of a sudden everything makes sense and I can figure it all out. And, you know, that speaks again to how these ecosystems start to engage with us. One of his terms is an eco field, right? So this field of frequency that we can create, and you don't have to have 118 acres. He promised me, he goes, your 1/10 of an acre in Austin, will make its own eco field. You know, we put in bunch bamboo. It's 20 feet tall. It gave us a little privacy. We planted some fruit trees, apples, plums, tomatoes, different things like that. We, you know, fuck the Bermuda grass. We were putting clover down, right? Give me some green manure on the ground. And then all of a sudden there's just bees everywhere as the clover starts to flower and it's dumping nitrogen back and our trees are taking off. That little space had its own eco field and we could feel that, right? You could add enough plants to your apartment on the back patio and inside that it would change the feeling of your place, especially as you give back to and love those plants, the energy shifts. And, obviously, the bigger the field you shift, the bigger the shift there will be. And so I feel like that's already something that's palpable to people that we bring in. And to speak to the, you know, the draw, like where's the draw for people to understand that all it takes is going to a place like that. You know, whether you go to Rome Ranch or you come to our place or you go to any of these other farms. And I like the fact that because of our education, the way it's set up, you know, we have people out at the farm that have nothing to do with farming. And all of a sudden they're like, whoa, what are you guys doing here with this farm?
That's freaking awesome. And on the topic of the eco field, I know it'd be so much different to visit what you're describing versus a plot of land in Nebraska that's been conventionally raised, chemically sprayed for generations, because that will probably feel like it's dead, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last question I have is going back to the rain part you mentioned, because I've never heard of that. You were just talking, you mentioned a book or a term with the rain. I don't know if you know.
Yeah. So dive into biodynamics from Rudolf Steiner. He has a book on it. It's challenging. The way it was worded to me was, you know, he wrote this book a year before he died. And these weren't books. You know, he was lecturing and people would take notes on the lecture. And then those transcripts got made into books years later, over 118 different topics and like 300 different books. Steiner was way the fuck ahead of his time. And as he was speaking on biodynamics to agriculturalists, he had been around for a while. And a lot of Europeans that realized the introduction of chemicals and the introduction of fertilizers was going to haunt them in the long run, even outside of health consequences, the land itself was getting worse because of it. And those who were tapped in realized that's not the way. How do we apply what Steiner's teaching to the land? And Steiner understood things, you know, on a way deeper level, from a cosmic level to an energetic level to a spiritual level, and how he applied these things is different. So when you dive into biodynamics, there's some woo-woo shit out there, you know, that actually has application, because the beautiful thing is Steiner died 100 years ago, and there's people that have been doing biodynamic farming for over 100 years, and showing the results of that. And, people, when they switch to organic eating and things like that, I mean, that's a great first step, right? That name has been bastardized and will continue to be bastardized. Any name, even biodynamics in the future, if they don't protect it, will be bastardized. So, it's hard with language, right? I remember at a certain point, it was like, I'm eating more organic beef, and everybody's like, hooray. And then you're like, well, it's not grass finished, right? That kind of thing. And so, you start to nitpick and find, and then regenerative at some point, that's going to get taken by big corporations, and you'll label thing regenerative if you, whatever, X amount of carbon sequestration or some shit like that. And it actually isn't the best possible thing. Who knows where that'll go to? But when you really study some of the people who have studied under Steiner, that makes it a lot more applicable. And then you can start to do some of these amendments. And he has different amendments, biodynamic amendments, some of which help with fungus, some of which are a broadcast compost that doesn't make sense with the amount or the quality or the quantity that you take of it, that you could apply it as far as you can. So an example of this is you get a dairy cow who is nursing. So she's delivered, she's nursing, and you scoop with a bullhorn that has to be a certain type of horn because it's grown in a Fibonacci sequence, the poop, and you bury that for 6 months. When you pull it out, it's no longer poop. The energetics of as above, so below have actually changed the composition of that. Then you mix that into a barrel of water, and you broadcast this out on the land either with your hand or with a tree branch. That tree branch becomes an extension of you. It has to be something organic. You can't go flopping it out with a plastic spray bottle or an oar or something from a boat, right? You have to use a hand or a stick. And as you do that, I mean, the first time I did it, I was like, there's not a lot of this getting on every tree with how much we're able to cover and for how much this says it can cover, right? Like we could cover the whole land with one horn where the poop mixed with water. And yet it still has a profound impact on it. And it's changing the energetics. It's changing what's available already within the land to express to the plants around it. And there are other things there that you can use to either dry up your land if it's too wet or call in more rain if it's too dry. And that's well documented in biodynamics. The piece on Sepp Holzer's stuff, if you read permaculture, his chapter 2 in permaculture is on hydrological balance. The book is about 160 plus pages. Chapter 2, hydrological balance, is 82 fucking pages. It should have been its own small book, right? And so when you understand that in the game of permaculture, water, hydrological balance, is the bulk of it. It's why we dug out and made that spiral, and it's why, thankfully, there's already 3 natural ponds on the land that continue to refill themselves based on how they were built, where they're built, and our clay. They can hold that without needing plastic or concrete on the bottom. But yeah, thinking about that, like when you come in an understanding of hydrological balance, that water rises, the trees soak it up. There's different ways on how that starts to generate its own recycling and its own recycling process. When you study Sepp Holzer's work, you can understand if you do that on enough land, you will bring in your own rain.
That's freaking cool. I've just never heard of that. So thank you for explaining. I think that's really all I have. So I guess for the listeners, if you want to share anything that they could find you at.
Yeah. Meet me at gardnersofeden.earth. Like I said, it's still its minimum viable product as far as the website's concerned. To answer your question on offerings, one of our next educational pieces, which we'll try to make as cheap as possible, is going to be a field harvest and a day in the life of. So it's going to be a 2-day adventure where we'll harvest the sheep. We'll already have some meat that's been dry aged before, and we'll have a big bonfire on Saturday night. So it'll be a Saturday, Sunday. We'll get to shoot guns. We'll get to, change out the mobile line, the mobile fencing for the sheep and move them. We'll get to buck chicken stalls. We'll get to plant some trees and stuff in the market garden. And we'll get to work out. We'll get to hit the sauna and the ice bath. I mean, this is what we do. We are fitness-oriented people. I come from a health and wellness background, and we're into farming. And so it's all the things that are a part of our daily schedule. And so we're going to hit that on a weekend. We'll have one big meal together. With lamb, probably just burgers, but it'll be fire, and we'll bring in some other local stuff, our own honey, and some raw dairy from Strick Farms, people in the area. And we'll try to have everything either off our land or nearby as our meal. But it's really going to be just to live for 2 days how we live every day. Let's have a nice big community event where we get to practice these things, and you could see maybe you only have a half an acre and you can't plant a bunch of trees. You can plant 20 trees. And you can have 2 dozen chickens. Mm-hmm. Cool, man. Let's show you how easy it is, right? And you get to that, and some of it is hard work, some of it is sweat, but some of it's really fun. And if you go for a jog in the summer when it's 100 plus degrees out, all of a sudden the summer doesn't kick your ass that bad, right? If you can go outside and say yes and lean into the thing that you're afraid of, it makes everything else easier. So we're going to practice those things. And I think that's going to be really good. We'll put that up if you email us at gardnersofeden.earth. Hey, I'm interested in the day in the life. When is that kind of thing. The second we announce it, you'll get an email that says, hey, this is when it is what we're doing. So people can be privy to that. Also, I didn't really talk too much about the coaching and things like that, but Fit for Service is a mastermind where we split 200 people up into 6 groups. One is physically fit. That's what I'm teaching. It's basically a class on health and wellness. Mentally fit with Eric Godsey, emotionally fit. We have financially fit, relationship fit, and spiritually fit, which all the coaches teach. And so any of these courses, you would take that course, and then at the end of the course, we have these big meetups. And the next one we're doing is in Montana. After that, trimester 2, you can go to fitforservice.com and sign up for trimester 2. We're going to meet in Sedona at the ranch I was telling you about, Ob's Ranch out there. End of the year, we're going to be going to Malibu out in LA in January. Super nice. So each trimester, you can choose your own adventure on which course you want to take, but everyone meets back up. And we do shamanic breath work. We do ecstatic dance. We do a whole host of things that are meant to get you outside of your comfort zone and open you up in a new way. And you get to meet a ton of like-minded, awesome people. So fitforservice.com for that. And then, of course, if you just want to listen and hear more, Kyle Kingsbury podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, those 3 things, all the listeners, you got to check out because all 3 of those events, or all 3 of those things sound awesome. Thank you for joining, Kyle.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother.
Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.